For decades, the Islamic Republic of Iran has looked almost unshakable. But now historic protests are challenging its very foundations. So today we're going to dig into some expert analysis on what might come next for one of the most consequential nations on Earth. Okay, let's start with this really bold prediction from Karim Sajadpour at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. It really sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. It suggests a massive shift is coming, a move away from the clerical rule that's defined Iran for almost 50 years. The big question is, what kind of shift will it be? All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at why the current protests are so different. Then, we'll dive into the weaknesses inside the regime itself. After that, we'll see how foreign powers are reacting. And finally, we'll explore what could possibly come next for a post-Khamenei Iran. So, Iran's no stranger to protests, right? We saw them back in 2009 and again in 2022. But this time, well, experts are saying this feels different, like truly existential for the regime. Let's get into why.
Just look at the sheer scale of this movement. It's not like past protests. This is happening everywhere, in all 31 provinces. It's cutting across class, ethnicity, and it's even happening in places that were supposed to be regime strongholds, like Qum and Mashhad. And the slogans? They're ferocious. People are directly calling for the end of the Islamic Republic itself.
And that really gets to the core of it. The demand is simple: regime change. We're past the point of asking for reforms. All the different grievances, whether they're political, economic, or social, they've all merged into this one singular demand. People are basically saying the whole system has to go. And this number right here, 75%, that's the demographic engine driving all of this. 3/4 of the entire country has no memory of the revolution. Think about it. They've only ever known this system, a system that's mismanaged the economy and tried to control every part of their lives. What they want more than anything is just a normal life.
Okay, so we've seen the strength of the protests from the outside. Now let's flip the coin and look inside the regime itself to analyze its structure and its deep, deep weaknesses. This is key to understanding why it's so vulnerable right now.
This is where analyst Karim Sajadpour offers this incredible metaphor. He calls it a zombie regime. It's a powerful idea. The living parts of the regime, its ideology, its legitimacy, its economy, they're all dying off. But the dead part? Its brutal, lethal capacity for violence? That keeps it staggering forward. It can't inspire anymore, so it has to intimidate. So where does the real power lie? Well, you've got this pyramid structure. At the very top, you have the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, but the real center of gravity, it's not really the clergy anymore. It's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. These guys aren't just a military, they control a massive economic empire. That's why a lot of people say Iran is less of a theocracy and more of a military regime just wearing clerical robes.
So who are the people running the show? Well, back at the beginning of the revolution, it was estimated to be about 80% true believers and 20% opportunists. Now, that is completely flipped on its head. The vast majority are in it for money and power, not ideology. But here's the catch. The man at the very top is still a true believer.
And for that true believer at the top, these three things are absolutely non-negotiable. He sees them as the core pillars holding up the entire building. In his mind, if you give ground on any one of them, like getting rid of the mandatory hijab, it's like taking a sledgehammer to a pillar. The whole thing comes crashing down. He looks at what happened with Gorbachev and the Soviet Union and is terrified of making the same mistake.
Okay, so this whole crisis, it's not happening in a vacuum, right? The world is watching. So let's take a look at how the major powers are playing this.
And when you look at the big players, Russia and China have totally different goals here. For Russia, hey, the current situation is kinda perfect. A globally isolated Iran isn't a competitor in energy markets, and it's a useful anti-Western ally. China, on the other hand, is playing the long game. A stable, open Iran could be a huge energy partner and a key piece of its global trade strategy. So while Russia benefits from the chaos, China would actually benefit from stability. So all of this leads us to the big final question. The regime is decaying, the people are pushing back, so what's next? What comes after Khamenei?
The supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is 86 years old. His health is always a topic of speculation. This isn't some abstract, far-off question. The biological clock is ticking, loud and clear. A transition is coming, one way or another.
So what are the options? What could Iran look like after Khamenei? Well, analysts have sketched out a few possible futures. Will it be like post-Soviet Russia with a nationalist strongman? Or more like China, an authoritarian state that opens its economy? Then there's the nightmare scenario, a North Korea-style state, even more isolated and brutal. Or maybe it becomes a military-run country like Pakistan, or a populist autocracy like Turkey.
Okay, so you've seen the possibilities. Which path is the most likely? Well, if you look at history, something like 4 out of 5 authoritarian transitions just end up with another form of authoritarianism.
And that leads us right back to where we started. The most probable outcome seems to be a move away from the turban, away from clerical rule, and toward a nationalist strongman who almost certainly comes from the security services, from the IRGC. Someone who might trade the slogan "Death to America" for something a lot more like "Make Iran Great Again."
You know, there's this quote from the Iranian intellectual Ahmad Khosravi from way back in the 1930s that just hits so hard right now. He basically said Iran owed the mullahs one chance to govern, just so they could prove their own incompetence. Well, after almost 50 years, most Iranians would tell you that that debt has been paid in full. And that leaves us with one final, haunting question. The regime's debt has been settled. The only question left is who's going to collect.